Good afternoon and welcome everyone. My name is Victor Sin. I'm the MC today and I work in the Civic Engagement team of the Asian Law Alliance. Thank you very much for taking the time to attend this vigil to remember the lives lost in the Atlanta spas on March 16, 2021. First, as a continuing Asian Law Alliance practice, I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge the land that each of us are on today. In San Jose, California, we are living, learning, and organizing on the land of the Mawekma and Tamian Ohlone tribes. Together, let us commit to educating ourselves and advocating for indigenous peoples, communities neglected and displaced by the US government and other colonial powers across the world. I know people here are tuning in from different areas, so I encourage you to learn what land you are living on by using the websites that we are showing in the screen. The Asian Americans Advancing Justice Atlanta released a joint statement earlier today that many organizations, including Asian Law Alliance, have signed on. We express our gratitude to Asian Americans Advancing Justice Atlanta for leading this effort, and I'm going to read the joint statement now. On the one-year anniversary of Atlanta spa shootings, we call for reflection and action. On March 16, 2021, 8 people, including 6 Asian women massage workers, were killed at 3 spas in Metro Atlanta area. As we mark the one-year anniversary of this tragedy, we honor the victims, the survivors, and their families. We place their healing, care, and peace at the heart of our remembrance. We are grateful to the local and national communities of care that blossomed over the past year and that have centered the families of victims and survivors. We have centered those most directly impacted by connecting them to critical services and raising funds for victims and their families. For our broader community, we continue to tend to the process of healing by finding inspiration in the traditions of our elders. We are also continuing to advocate for policies and solutions that address the root causes of violence and hate so that we may all live in safe communities. We have held our community members close as we navigate loss, grief, and trauma, not only in the wake of the Atlanta spa shootings, but in experiencing continued violence, misogyny, and racism against Asian Americans in Georgia and beyond. Most recently, the brutal murders of Michelle Alisa Doe and Christine Yuna Lee within weeks of each other in New York City have renewed the fears and anxieties of Asian and Asian American women and femmes who are subjected to both gender and race-based discrimination and violence. In Albuquerque, New Mexico, 2 Asian massage workers were killed during robberies at Asian spas, heightening the fears felt by Asian American and immigrant small business owners. These highly visible tragedies also call our attention to the everyday experiences that the most vulnerable members of our communities face in the crosshairs of white supremacy, misogyny, and imperialism. The racial and sexual exploitations wrought by the presence of US militarism in Asia and the Pacific, the resulting geopolitical upheavals that force migration, the daily terrors of a system that criminalizes immigrants, massage workers, and sex workers, housing and financial insecurity, and the ongoing abuses and dangerous conditions that migrant, low-wage service workers face daily. To heal, we must grapple with these truths and address white supremacy and misogyny as the root causes of violence and hate. To do so requires us to hold uncomfortable dualities. It means acknowledging the pain and fear that motivates some victims and community members to call for carceral solutions such as increased police presence, hate crimes legislation, and other forms of punishment, while at the same time interrogating how these responses criminalize and cause harm in the name of public safety. Grappling with the truth also means confronting anti-Blackness in our Asian American communities. We cannot allow the tragedy of the shootings in Atlanta to justify policies that expand law enforcement and its disproportionate impacts on Black communities. Rather, Alongside our Black, Indigenous, Latinx, Arab, and Pacific Islander allies, we are inspired to reimagine what justice, healing, love, and hope can look like for our communities. Over the past year, we witnessed messages and acts of community care, empowerment, and solidarity reverberating in streets, parks, and community centers as more people have come together, bound by grief and committed to radical change. Together, we commit to push beyond the oppressive boundaries of white supremacy and anti-Blackness and build sustaining communities of care. We can address the needs of victims of racialized and gender-based violence while also holding our elected leaders accountable for creating policies that center our communities. This includes investing in community-based organizations that are often on the front lines of caring for victims, survivors, and vulnerable communities in the languages they use, and with sensitivity to their cultures, livelihoods, and immigration statuses. Our elected leaders must provide long-standing investments and resources for the families of victims and survivors well after the immediate crisis has abated. Access to victims' compensation funds, fully fund violence prevention and restorative justice programs, and public infrastructure and institutions focused on public health and education. Together, we can struggle in more powerful ways for community safety and healing, for racial and economic justice, for stable housing, for access to quality health care, including mental health and education and a livable wage, for the right to vote, for the right to organize, and for art and beauty in our neighborhoods. On this anniversary, we will remember the lives taken and the families who still struggle without their loved ones. And we recommit to expanding and deepening our community of care for all communities, beginning in Atlanta and spreading throughout the country and the world. Now, I would like to ask Richard Conter, our Executive Director at Asian Law Alliance, to give a statement from ALA.
Thank you, Victor. Asian Law Alliance has joined the collective statement from Asian Americans Advancing Justice, Atlanta, along with hundreds of other organizations and individuals. We are holding this vigil today on March the 12th to honor the request of Asian Americans Advancing Justice, Atlanta, to allow for March 16th to be a sacred day of remembrance for the families and survivors. We honor and remember the victims, survivors, and their families. March 16th, 2021 is a day that all of us will recall with a heavy heart as we learned of the horrific news from Georgia, and we ask why. How can this senseless violence directed toward our community be happening again and again and again? And this senseless violence has been directed towards the Black, Latinx, Indigenous, LGBTQ+, Muslim, Pacific Islander, and Jewish communities as well. Is there a solution? Centering on the victims and survivors, there needs to be support for grief counseling for survivors and families of victims. These services must be culturally competent and in the language that is most appropriate. And those of us in the community who have been traumatized by this violence, we need trauma-informed care as well. To all of our allies from the Black, Latinx, Indigenous, LGBTQ+, Muslim, Pacific Islander, and Jewish communities, please know that the Asian Law Alliance has got your back. June will mark 40 years since Vincent Chen was murdered in Detroit. Vincent's death in 1982 sparked a nationwide movement within the Asian American community that brought together Asian Americans from all walks of life and from all ethnicities who were shocked and moved to take action by his murder. In the 40 years since Vincent died, we have seen a rise of dangerous right-wing extremist organizations who on January 6, 2021, tried to stage a coup d'etat by storming Washington, D.C. and attempting to violently overturn the valid and fair election of President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris. Locally, Mayor Mariko Sayak of Los Gatos was shouted at during council meetings and at her home that she was not that she was, quote, not wanted here, unquote. Also in Los Gatos last year, a Filipino healthcare worker was shoved to the ground and told to, quote, go back to China, unquote. There's work to do locally in Santa Clara County. These white supremacist hate groups are here in our community. The hate that fueled the Atlanta murders is here in our community. We must stand up and speak out against this hate. Now I'd like to introduce Dorothy Huang, one of ALA's supervising attorneys. Dorothy?
Thank you, Richard. The grief that overwhelmed our communities 1 year ago remains with many of us today, along with the memories of those who are no longer with us. We would like to take a few moments now to remember the individuals who tragically lost their lives in this attack on March 16th, 2021. Elena Ashley Yon Gonzalez. Paul Andre Michaels. Hyunjung Grant. Tunjung Park. Tunja Kim. Yongye Yu. Xiaoyo Feng. Xiajie Dan. Please join us as we observe a brief moment of silence to honor these victims and to reflect upon the impact of their loss on their families, friends, and our communities. Thank you. We are happy to have all of you join us this afternoon. Whether you have known ALA for decades or if you're hearing about us for the very first time, we welcome you and we hope to see you more in the future. ALA is committed to providing equal access to justice for Asian American, Pacific Islander, and low-income communities. But justice is more than getting your foot inside a courtroom. We believe in serving, supporting, and empowering communities through holistic means to improve the quality of life for all. Equal rights, equal access, equal justice. Taking a stand for racial justice and against racial violence or oppression is at the core of ALA's ongoing mission and our mere existence. ALA provides direct legal services through counseling and representation to both victims of hate crimes and their families. They suffer not only physical or emotional trauma, but they may also face eviction, income insecurity, domestic violence, or even loss of immigration status because of the circumstances surrounding or caused by the hate incident. ALA is actively engaged in community education and outreach about hate crimes, victims' rights, and the history of racial injustice and anti-Asian sentiment, because we have seen the power of education and accurate information in its ability to strengthen and comfort us in these times of isolation and fear. We want people to know what is happening, why it's happening, and what they can do about it. As advocates and organizers, ALA is always looking to develop and invest in new leaders who can speak for and from within their communities. Our work is not to give people a voice, but rather to remind them of the voice that they already have and support them to elevate and amplify that voice that had been drowned out for so long. We see every individual as a potential advocate and community leader in their own right, whether they are behind a cash register at a small business for 12 hours a day, struggling through their freshman year of high school, or walking their 5-year-old child to kindergarten while constantly and fearfully looking over their shoulder. Asian Law Alliance will go to these small businesses so that they will know how to protect themselves and what to do in the face of violence and uncertainty. We will go to these schools and we will find those parents who fear for their safety and for that of their children. We will push for better resources and training in schools to recognize, prevent, and respond to racially motivated and anti-Asian bullying. We will continue to collaborate with incredible partners to unite against hate and let our communities know that we are here, we are listening, and we have your back. We have a long road ahead of us, and if you feel compelled, we welcome your company on this journey. You can volunteer your time or just share your story. Words of encouragement are also welcome. Our contact information will be provided at the end of this event, so please do reach out if you feel compelled to do so. And now I'd like to turn it over to our Executive Director, Richard Konda, to speak more about ALA's involvement with the proposed bill AB 1947.
Thank you, Dorothy. Asian Law Alliance is supporting Assembly Member Phil Ting and Assembly Member Richard Bloom's AB 1947, Freedom from Hate Crimes Bill, because law enforcement's response to hate crimes has been inadequate. If signed into law, AB 1947 would require each law enforcement agency to adopt a hate crimes policy, including specific guidelines for recognizing, reporting, and responding to hate crimes. AB 1947 would require law enforcement agencies to submit their hate crime policies, brochures, and training schedules to the California Department of Justice to ensure compliance. A hearing on AB 1947 before the Assembly Public Safety Committee will be held soon. We will provide updates on how to support AB 1947 on the ALA website as soon as that information is available. Now, I'd like to introduce Maylin Aquino, who has recently joined the ALA staff as our volunteer outreach coordinator. Maylin.
Hello, thank you, Richard. In order to continue with the celebration of life of those who passed away nearly 1 year ago today, we are choosing to highlight some rallies that will be taking place throughout the nation on March 16th. These rallies will be hosted and organized by Asian Justice Movement and Humanics. And if you are interested in finding a rally near you, please visit the links listed here. If you are also interested in contacting Asian Law Alliance for any legal assistance or to volunteer, our phone number is listed here along with our business hours. Thank you for attending today's event, and we hope to work with you soon in the future.